how to onboarding the next millions consumer application powered by Bitcoin. I'm a founder at Nubit. I'm also a CS professor at University of California, Santa Barbara, where I do research in the space of compiler and Web3 security. And what's the problem we try to solve at Nubit? So let's first look at where we are exactly at Web3. For instance, here in this figure, if you look at that from bottom, so basically we have a whole bunch of choices on different layer 1, right? You can choose whether you want to do the settlement on Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, etc. And based on that, there's a whole bunch of static crypto access, which will be basically, the liquidity will be basically improved through normal restaking protocols such as Babylon and EigenLayer for reusing your Bitcoin as well as Ethereum to secure other ecosystem. And based on that, we have layers and layers of other protocol. And eventually, those will be serving for upstream infrastructure like L2, L3, etc. So at this moment, you might wonder, so what do we need exactly? You see a whole bunch of infrastructure are being built, but we also see that there is a fact that the entire industry is suffering from tractions, right? Here, what do I mean by traction is that we need traction from the consumer aspect, okay? But if you look at the problems on the top, indeed, there's a whole bunch of talented Web2 programmers. They have been building very great application, and they want to basically improve their capital efficiency through Web3 technology. But the moment they jump in, there's a whole bunch of barriers before they enter them, because they have to resolve layers and layers of problems, which I will be elaborating in the next few slides. So how do we solve this problem, right? We are human, and one of the biggest aspect that we are good at is we can learn from past mistakes, and we can stay on top of the shoulder of prior giants. And let's take a look at how Web2 application, they achieve mass adoptions. For instance, here I'm using WeChat as an example, which is one of the most popular messenger application in China, and then it has over billions of users. And if you look at the architecture of WeChat, so WeChat is popular not only because it provides powerful social functionality as well as payment, storage, but the biggest aspect, strongest point of WeChat is actually all those complex modules are being encapsulated in a very clean platform called WeChat Dev2. In the sense that as the developer of the WeChat platform, so you can easily build your application without worrying about, hey, where should I put my money, and how should I store the information of my user? And all of those complex things will be basically hidden behind those kind of application developers. So in this case, you might wonder, wouldn't it be nice if we can replicate a similar architecture in Web3, right? In the sense that in here, I think one of the lucky things that we have right now is that we already have a similar platform like WeChat. In here is Telegram, because Telegram already have almost the same size of user as WeChat. And but there's a lot of bunch of other aspects need to be built, including payments, including on-chain module, including storage. And more importantly, we want to wrap up those complex modules in a way that, like the traditional Web2 developer, they don't have to deal with those kind of complex functionalities in Web3. So how do we do that? And doing so is actually not very easy, because think about that from a traditional Web2 developer, right? So if you want to move your application to blockchain and Web3, so there's a lot of things that you have to worry about. So you have to learn smart contract, and you have to get familiar with blockchain. And then the moment you deploy your application to some L2 or L1, so you have to pay tax, right? Because that's how they make profit. And then once you set up everything, you still need to worry about security, right? Because we are talking about billions of access. And a tiny mistake that you make in your protocol can basically make you lose everything. So now, in order to solve those problems, I'm just going to highlight 3 key ingredients from our perspective. So the first key ingredient is that similar to the story that we've seen in WeChat. So the first thing is that we need a unified wallet. So you might wonder, hey, didn't we already have dozens of wallets in Web3? But if you think about like the functionality of those wallets, none of them actually satisfy all of those four together. So what do I mean by those four properties? The first property is that they should naturally support multi-blockchain and multi-access by default, in the sense that I don't need to like insanely bridge my access from one chain to another. Those should be completely transparent to the user. And then the second is it should support social login, right? Why do I need to register one account per every single wallet, right? I only need to use my Google account or Facebook account. That should be it. That should be the passport of my Web3. And then the third one is that it should be having very handy on-ramp and off-ramp functionality, in the sense that I should be able to restore and deposit my money anytime, any moment. And last but not least, in the sense that those wallets should be natively integrated into some big social platforms, such as WeChat or Telegram. Because without native integrations, the user experience is going to get hurt. This is first ingredient, and then the second ingredient is that we should power user and Web2 developer with their own chain and what we call mini chain. So why do we need mini chain? Let's take a look at what's happening today on the left-hand side. Right? On the left-hand side, basically you have some L2, and the L2 trying to onboard all kind of user and applications, and every application share the same amount of service, right? If you think about this model, it doesn't make quite sense, because first, like the requirements of a gaming application is going to be very different from the requirements of an AI application in terms of computation as well as storage. And not mention that like all those applications need to pay tax to those L2 providers. And finally, think about that. Let's say you just get your monthly salary this month, right? Like, do you want to go to McDonald's for a burger, or do you want to go to a very fancy Korean restaurant to have a nice customized bulgogi, right? So that's a different. So that's why we help users to onboard with their own mini chain. And on those mini chain, they will have their own chain, and then they can customize to whatever they want according to the need of different applications. So at this point, you might wonder, hey, Professor, you just mentioned there are layers and layers of blockchain already. So wouldn't this create a worse fragmentation? And no worry, that's our third ingredient kicking. So imagine you have a whole bunch of applications, traditional Web 2 application, and then they onboard on this architecture based on mini chain, and they are their own owners of the ecosystem. So in this case, if they want to do communication, and those communication can be like a bridging access. Let's say you want to bridge your Bitcoin from another chain to your current chain, or if you just want to do some common messaging like a communications, let's say I want to share the user information of the user. In this case, similar to what we see in traditional programming languages, we provide two different kinds of choices. And the first choice is that you can perform a message passing through what we call a universal bridge. So those universal bridge you can think of, it's quite general, and then you can exchange any kind of message that you want, but the downside is that it's going to be slightly slow and expensive, okay? Just similar to what you see on those cross-rail bridge. And we also provide the second options, because by default, all of those applications is going to use the Nubit DA layer by default. So what does the DA does? You can think of it like a decentralized database. And the security of the decentralized database is guaranteed by Bitcoin staker, okay? And so if all of those applications are using the same data availability layer, so in that case, they can perform like a messaging passing in a very cheap and efficient way. And so putting all together, so let's zoom out a little bit, because like in the previous few slides, I tried to motivate the insights of different solutions. Now, what happens from the Web 2 programmer's perspective, right? So here, so what you see at the top are those traditional Web 2 programmer. They can be, let's say, they have their own very cool, like a Telegram application. It can also be very, let's say, WeChat applications. What we can offer is that they just need to tell us what they need, right? You can tell us what kind of a settlement layer you want to do, L1, and what kind of L2 do you prefer? Do you prefer Arbitrum OB stack? And then, so what Nubit provided is to basically launch this kind of hard vertical architecture automatically for our client so that they don't need to worry about any complexity about blockchain. All they need to access is the SDK that we provided. Okay? So now I'm going to slightly jump into a little bit of technical detail about how we implement that. So basically, regarding the universal bridge, which we use to perform like messaging, passing, and communications, so if you're familiar with L2 architecture, like normally if you have L2 for every single application, they're going to run their own sequencer, which is going to be problematic from a security perspective, because what happens if if you have a transaction that involve multiple chain, and then now you don't have atomic. So in order to battle against that problem, we use a shared sequencer protocol, in the sense that all of those mini chains is going to share the same sequencer. So which means that the transaction or communication that happens across multiple chains is going to have this kind of atomic property, in the sense that no matter how complex thing you do, as long as there's anything wrong happen in the middle, I'm going to roll back the entire thing. Okay? So this is the inside of the universal bridge, and this is the lowest level about our DA secured by Bitcoin. So from the high level perspective, you can think of Nubit DA is a sidechain, Cosmos sidechain, in parallel with Bitcoin, in the sense that the core of the DA is a proof of stake protocol whose economic security is guaranteed by Bitcoin staker thanks to the Babylon protocol. And then because we are doing data storage, so which means that in our DA, we also provide both full storage node as well as a line node to provide those kind of data storage services. And then once we have everything together, so you might wonder what's the key ingredients of encapsulating everything and hide those kind of complexity to the Web 2 developer. So I believe that all of you, if you have any basic programming experience in Web 2, there's a very famous design pattern called MVC, Model View Controller, right? Basically, view basically corresponds to the interface. It can be an app, it can be a browser interface. And then you also have controller, which does the business logic. And finally, you have model. And traditionally, you have models stored on your memory, on your file system, on your database. Now you can think of when you want to put your application on chain, you can think of you just add an additional tiny model that is relevant to blockchain, which is nothing special but ledger, right? You want to update your ledger, you want to access your account, that's it. If you think about that from an MVC model's perspective, this is basically extensions of the traditional Web 2 development, which is going to be very, very easy to onboard existing Web 2 developers. And finally, so what I want to say is that you might wonder, is this architecture only exists in your slide, or is there something real? So this is actually an instantiation that we already launched in our testnet, in the sense that currently we already help 3 Telegram applications, including Polymarket's application, as well as gaming application, to launch on our current platform, and some of them use OP Stack, some of them use Arbitrum. And within just 2 days, we already have around 30,000 daily active users, which generate 120,000 transactions. And finally, I want to conclude my presentation using a quote from Dan Feist. So basically, this is a trick that he made last week. Basically, what he said is that, let's say you build a lot of roads, right? But there's nobody there. So is this useful? Not yet. So then you build a lot of houses, right? But still, there's nobody want to live there because there's no job. Now you start to build factory, hospitals, and then you have job, and people start to moving. And all of a sudden, like the infrastructure from the previous two steps become variable. And before that, it was just potential variable. So the point he wants to make is that all of them together are variable. However, if they miss one of the ingredients, it will make everything useless. And if we cannot solve this problem, so the entire Web3 infrastructure will become nothing but a digital casino. And he doesn't want to see that, neither did I, and that's the problem that we Nubit trying to solve. Thank you.